Good afternoon and warm welcome to this special interview. My name is Anoop Verma. I am the editor of ETGovernment, which is a vertical of the Economic Times focused on covering government initiatives and policies. Today, our guest for this special interview is Dr. Mukesh Aghi. He is the president and CEO of US India Strategic Partnership Forum, USISPF. USISPF is working to facilitate better economic and political relationship between India and United States by providing a platform for all stakeholders to come together. Welcome, Mr. Aghi.
Thank you.
We will be discussing the outcome of the present elections and how it influences the relationship between India and the USA. So most exit polls were predicting that more than 300 seats for the BJP, but Modi's party ended up with just 240 seats. So what kind of impact can this diminished strength in the Lok Sabha have on Modi's foreign policy, especially in context of India-US relationship?
Well, with a diminished majority in the parliament, but having a majority with the coalition government, I don't think this has an impact on the US-India relationship, or it has an impact on any of the foreign policy of India with the rest of the world. And the reason I say that is because you have to understand geopolitically, things have changed in the last 10 years, whereas Indian economy is playing a much more pivotal role than it was 10 years ago. India's position vis-a-vis US and China has shifted. What we have seeing is that the stress point between US and China is increasing, and we don't see that getting better. And US looks at India as a partner to deal and manage China as a partnership. And if that's the case, then what happens is the India role becomes much more pivotal. But beyond that, as the Indian economy grows to $4 trillion, to $5 trillion and beyond, it becomes a tremendous market opportunity for US companies to start looking at India. And also from a perspective of de-risking from China, India provides an opportunity for US companies to move a lot of their manufacturing so they're not exposed to China factor itself. So I think with a diminished majority, it has no impact on US-India relationship.
In the run-up to the counting of the votes, the stock markets were making new highs, almost new highs every day. And it was being rumored that on the election day, it will just go through the roof, the valuations of the market. But there was a huge crash on that day. And many of the small investors, they lost large amounts of money. More than 40 lakh crore of market cap was lost in a single day. So a significant part of the selling came from the large institutional foreign investors. So what motivated them to sell? I mean, do they know something that we don't know? Are they seeing a long-term decline in the Indian economy?
So I think you have to understand the markets are speculative. Markets sometimes are not logical, and they were basically punting on a much more stronger government majority in the parliament. And when it didn't come, basically a lot of FI investors reacted. But if you look at after the crash, market has corrected itself and is coming back to its normal factor. So I don't think there was anything different they knew. I think more of, I would say, for the institutional investors from outside, it was more of I call ignorance about the local politics. They thought that Prime Minister having a coalition, he may not be able to manage. But I think that was speculative. Now they come back to normalcy itself.
TDP has come in Andhra Pradesh. So how Andhra Pradesh was once it was united with Telangana. It was the center of software and electronics in India. So how can this change? What kind of changes are you expecting with the TDP coming in power in Andhra?
Well, you have to understand, Chandrababu Naidu was a pioneer in inviting multinational companies to come to Hyderabad. He was a visionary trying to build Andhra Pradesh with a new capital, with the renewable energy strategy, and basically revamp the state of Andhra Pradesh. So I believe his alignment with Prime Minister Modi's vision of New India is similar. What I see is basically more collaboration, more effort between the Prime Minister and Chandrababu Naidu. I see US companies now looking more seriously at Andhra Pradesh because it is going to be a much more friendly environment. So I think it's a plus point to have Chandrababu Naidu in the coalition because they tend to support each other driving the growth agenda.
BJP will be dependent on some coalition partners, like Nitish Kumar ji is there from Bihar, and Chandrababu Naidu ji is there from Andhra. These are the two major coalition partners, and some others also might also join in. What kind of impact this coalition politics can have on BJP's domestic economic policies? Can you see any changes from the previous term?
Well, I think I don't see much changes because you have to manage the budget, you have to manage the deficit, you have to create jobs, and so I think there'll be more consensus approach to the whole process, but the objectives don't change because I think you have a population, a young population, where million jobs need to be created every month, and they will only be created if you bring in more international investment into the economy, bring in more international technology into the economy. And that's going to happen because you're going to reform. You're going to make ease of doing business better itself. So I think I don't see a change in policy. I see a change in style.
You talked about the budget. So the Modi government will be presenting its first budget, the third term of Modi, very soon. So this budget might set the economic agenda for the next 5 years. So what is something that the finance minister can do to further India-US trade relationship in this budget? What kind of reforms can she bring in, she or he, whoever becomes the finance minister?
Yeah, I think you have to understand uh, India's market share or India's GDP share in the global GDP is around 3%. And that has to increase. And that's going to increase by also having more exports globally. And for India to export, it needs to have much more uh, FTAs signed. And I think US is a critical factor. Yes, India is working with the Europeans itself. And for FTAs to happen, there has to be some kind of a reforms agenda in the budget itself to make sure that you're able to get more exports out. Yes, the PLI scheme has worked. In the case of Apple, Apple will be basically now manufacturing 25% of its iPhone 16 in India itself. So I think if we can work out a budgetary process where you can attract more international company in the manufacturing environment, bring in more basically export oriented and get more integrated with the global supply chain to making sure that our customs are much more efficient, more friendly. And so I think those are the kind of things we need to work on to make sure that at least the international investors are able to set up manufacturing, are able to export in a much more efficient manner. The logistics supply chain has to improve in the budget when it's presented. So you're able to create more jobs itself.
When Modi went to Washington last time, they signed some agreements on critical minerals and defense technologies, space technologies, AI, and other things. So, but now the implementation remains. So, what kind of progress are you expecting? Can there be some speedy progress on implementing those agreements so that there is economic growth and creation of jobs in the country?
So the visit basically had roughly 178 initiatives, and they were packaged under the umbrella called ISET, Initiative of Critical Emerging Technologies itself. And those are being managed directly under the White House and the PMO itself. And in some places, we have seen progress. In some places, I think we need to put in more effort. In fact, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor from the US, is coming June 17th into New Delhi to have a review of that also. So I think that's a very, very important initiative and that both countries need to work on. This covers from artificial intelligence to quantum to cybersecurity to critical minerals itself. supply chain. And I think that's a basically a platform we need to make sure that it's being executed in a very efficient manner.
In the last 5 years, a lot of important initiatives were taken to kickstart India's electronics sector. We are doing well in software, but hardware, we are nowhere. So Micron from USA came in. Now Taiwan's TSMC is investing here, and Tatas are also investing in a big way. So, but much more investment needs to come in if we are to become a serious player in the electronics, global electronics space. What initiatives can this new Modi government, third Modi government, take to make this possible?
See, you have to understand India has the lead in the software side. And if you look at most of the chip designs happen in India, we have over 300,000 chip designers. I think where we have to, and the effort is being put in to move into fabrication, to move into packaging, to move into basically working on more like 40 to 60 nanometer chips itself. I think that takes time. You got to build an ecosystem, and it can't happen within 2 years or 5 years. This has to be a 10-year vision. India has initiated. You have Micron, you have others coming in. I believe India is on the right path, but you have to understand it also requires tremendous amount of capital. You look at chip acts in the US, they are putting roughly $50 billion into reinitiating the chip effort in the United States. You look at the Chinese, they're putting $46 billion going down to much higher level chips manufacturing. So I think it requires a lot of capital, and that capital has to come in both from the government side, but also from the private sector. And it will take some time, but I believe that we are on the right track to at least build the whole ecosystem.
In the last Modi government, India had close economic and political ties with both USA and Russia. Somehow we managed to, achieve that end. Despite many global pressures, Modi government refused to break ties with Russia, and we continue to have a lot of petroleum purchases and other purchases from that country. Now, BJP doesn't have a complete majority. So, how does this situation change geopolitically India's foreign policy vis-a-vis Russia and US?
Well, you have to understand the dominance of a single power on a global stage is no longer the scenario. What we are seeing is a emergence of multipolar scenario itself. And while US is there, China is emerging, and so is India. And you have to understand, while the China-US rivalry will get much worse, India needs to make sure that it protects its interest. China is a neighbor, and we have a border which spans around 3,000 plus kilometers, which is a disputed border. And it's important that we keep our line of communication open with the Chinese. At the same time, it's important that our relationship with with Russia does not get interrupted, because once you basically isolate Russia, then you have I call a consortium of Russian, Chinese, Iranians, and North Korea becoming a single bloc. And I think that has an impact on India. So I think it's important that India maintains its line of communication and the relationship with Russia. I mean, say during the Ukraine war, India played a neutral role. India needed cheap oil. It took it from Russia. And I don't think it had an impact on India's economy in a positive way, because every dollar of price of a barrel of oil goes up, it has $1 billion impact on India's export also. So I think it's important that wherever India can get cheap oil is good for India. So why not? So I think US understands that. And at the same time, yes, as much as US will say, hey, come align with our policies, India has to maintain its independence. And I think regardless of coalition government, that will not get impacted.
So there is a lot of talk that India might get more closer to USA than China. But the fact is that bulk of the US investments and trade is with China, and India is nowhere close in matching that as of now. So, is it possible that India might actually become a bigger partner to USA than China in future?
Well, I think you have to look at multiple factors here. One is the trade between India and the US is growing exponentially, whereas trade between India and China is growing, but it's more and more heading towards more B2B rather than B2C itself. And India's strategy is to basically bring in less dependence on Chinese import. The second factor is that the U.S. companies need India from GCC perspective, global capability centers. Today we have around 1,600 of those, and they basically export roughly $122 billion worth of services. And you have large companies such as Qualcomm and others whose R&D is happening in India itself. So I think what we're seeing is the trend is more and more US investment is coming into India, and that's creating more high-end paying jobs. Whereas from China's perspective, the investment is getting less and less, and the trade is getting more and more focused on B2B rather than B2C. So I think the trend is going to be more and more India-US relationship, both on the security side and also in the economic partnership.
One last question. You interact with a lot of major industries in India and USA and other parts of the world. So, from the point of view of USISPF, if there was one major reform that Modi government could do in the budget or after that, and one major reform that the American government can do to bring the two countries more together and grow our economic ties, what would that be? One from the US and one from India.
I think from a India perspective, a bureaucratic reform will be critical. And the reason I say bureaucratic, uh, in the sense is you set a policy, but execution goes down from into the down the chain itself. And I think the sense of urgency the political leadership has does not translate down into the bureaucratic level. And it's important that they're aligned and we need to bring this bureaucracy to 21st century rather than having still the 19th century mindset itself. So I think that is going to be critical for the economy to grow. That's going to be important for the economy to accelerate itself. So it is important that's done from the India side. I think from the US side, there are multiple areas. One would be is increase the transfer of high-end technology into India. There are too many ITAR restrictions. There are too many basically suspicions about India's closeness to Russia and will this technology be shared with Russians itself. I think that suspicion needs to go away. Why is it that India and US can't basically work on just like US works with UK or with the Five Eyes nation itself? And I think that's basically is a trust factor which needs to be built. And I think that policy has to also change. So that will be from the US side also.
It's a very interesting point that you made in Indian context, that our bureaucracy is 19th century, 200 years old, and they have to come to now 21st century. So some major reforms, bureaucratic reforms are needed in this country.
No, it is true because I think you have to understand, the mindset is still very British. And while there are a lot of people who have the right intent, right attitude, you have to shift the culture of that environment. And you're there to serve the citizens, not rule the citizens. And so it's important we change that mindset. And until we change that mindset, the execution of the vision of the prime minister will not be that efficient. And there are some who really have shifted, but there's some who have not shifted. And I think that's where I see the biggest reform, that it has to be managed as you take India's economy to a $5 trillion and also as a vision of 2047 to be a $32 trillion economy.
Thank you, Dr. Aghi. It's a very nice talking to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Verma. Thank you.